Welcome to the podcast, Steve. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Yeah,
Good.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. It's been a long time coming. We've had the conversation for quite a while, so I'm excited to get to hear your story. It's quite interesting because obviously I know you, and we've actually built a relationship, kind of through the podcast. Weirdly, funnily enough, so it'll be really interesting to hear a little bit more about your backstory. So the first question, which I'm going to ask, which I ask everyone on the podcast, is, what is your earliest memory of alcohol? And that doesn't necessarily have to be drinking it. It could just be sort of growing up around it.
I think my first memory would probably be like with my parents. They were quite into their music when I was younger, and we used to go to this. We used to go to a few little festivals. There used to be one just outside of Bristol at a place called Ashton Court Festival, and I can remember being there about like 9 or 10, and other people at the festival were kind of staggering around and laughing and falling over. And I asked my dad, like what's going on over there, and being intrigued by like other people, kind of like adults messing about, being silly. And I think probably like, as far as I can remember, that's sort of like earliest memories really. My mum and dad didn't drink that much, but they used to have people round over on a weekend for dinner, and you'd kind of like be at the top of the stairs, kind of like sounded like, everyone got a bit not rowdy, but the laughter would go up, and it was quite intriguing, I think, at that point.
Do you remember sort of what, because you said was you curious almost of what that
I think so.
was?
I think as a kid you're like, you're curious about everything that's around you, but when adults are kind of like get a bit louder or get a bit like do stuff out of the ordinary that you don't expect adults to do, you're quite intrigued by that. And I think when you go to those sort of places, when you go to festivals, like adults do, or grown-ups do, let loose, like as I found out later in life.
Yeah, I find it interesting. I had the same sort of curiosity, I guess. My curiosity come from like a point of like, I wonder what that will do to me, when I'm kind of old enough to drink. Did you ever have those sort of thoughts?
Not really, no. It was just more sort of like, just sort of, I think that's probably like the earliest memories of other people drinking like around me. But it wasn't a really boozy household. People would come around at the weekend for dinner, and they'd have glasses of wine and stuff like that, but it wasn't anything more than that. My dad wasn't really like, he'd go out to the pub occasionally, but it wasn't like a booze heavy house or anything like that I grew up in.
What would you say was your sort of earliest memory moving forward then to the first time you did drink alcohol? Yeah.
I think probably sort of school time. I went from like quite a sort of nice, quite small, quite kind of like creative, arty primary school into like a really big sort of, I think it was like 2,000 people in the middle of like really rough housing estates in Bristol. I went from that primary school into that kind of secondary school environment, and I really struggled. Like it was like a real shock. It's pretty rough. And I think in order to sort of like get through it and kind of fit in, you sort of had to find your way. And my way when I was about sort of like 12, 13 was to kind of like find the slightly naughty kids and kind of hang out with them, and sort of my education basically sort of dropped off a cliff. I stopped. It was kind of like I felt like you had two ways to get through that school environment. You either like got your head down and studied and got picked on and had a really shit time, or you kind of dropped out a bit. And at that point I chose the sort of easier option. I dropped out really, and I found a kind of a group that lived in the local kind of like council estate, a place called Stockwood, just outside the school. And rather than go to school, we'd just go there and like drink basically. You'd find someone to buy you a few cans, or like we do. Did you ever do that thing where you kind of like have an empty water bottle and go to your like mum and dad's drinking liquor cupboard, and just like put in like a little bit of brandy, a little bit of gin, a little bit of whiskey?
We called it a shit mix. Yeah, so we used to do the same thing. And like you said, you'd never take off enough so that your parents would notice.
Yeah.
But 2 years down the line, there's like a bottle of port that no one ever drinks. It's slowly gone from being very full to like half
apologies
full.
to my parents if they if they have a listen of this, but Yeah, we used to do that, and I mean, it tasted horrible, but you'd have that, and then there was these big bottles of cider we used to get, like White Lightning.
Yeah, Frosty
Thunderbolt,
Jacks was something we...
2 litres, and you'd kind of like, it was super cheap because no one had much money. And I think like at that point, there was like a little bit of weed as well that was kind of kicking around. The dealers used to do this kind of £5 deal. Did you ever come across that?
No, what was that?
I don't know why they did it. I mean, they probably had, bigger clients, but like the kids would all chip in. So you chip in, like you'd get 5 of you and you chip in like a quid each. And then you get like a £5 deal of weed.
Right.
Which is like enough to get, 5 14-year-olds stoned.
Yeah, of course.
But it's probably like, really tiny. But yeah, we used to do that as well. So
what would you think? Because you touched on it there. It's quite interesting. You said like there was kind of 2 routes to go down. I think I resonated with that massively, purely because I was not very good at school. So I thought like my way to get through it was exactly the same as you. It was like be naughty. And that's because I struggled with education, and I struggled with the academic side of it. But you said that, you kind of used that as a route to get through school. Do you remember how you felt when you started hanging around with these people and drinking?
It was exciting. It was kind of exhilarating, You kind of like, in the back of my mind, I knew that I wasn't doing a good thing in terms of my education, but I also knew that it was kind of granting me a bit of a pass day to day. It kind of, would get me through the school days. And, they were kind of like, they were kids from like different backgrounds, and it was exciting. You'd get up to adventures, you'd get up to kind of like, when you're a kid, it's quite fun doing that kind of thing, isn't it? Certainly like I hadn't experienced anything like that, like getting pissed in the day and trying to get police to chase you and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, how did that progress through the years then? So like, Steve's now finished school.
Well, I couldn't wait to leave. Like I can remember sitting in a classroom once and just thinking like, I've just got to get to 16 and then I can do what I like with my life. Like even though it was kind of like exciting hanging around with that crowd, I knew it wasn't me. Like I was having to put on a front basically. And I couldn't wait to leave. And at 16, I tried going into like more education. I went over and I started a photography course in Bath actually, but lasted a couple of weeks really. And then went straight from there into working. So, and then moved out of home around that time as well, like 17, I think, probably. Left home, which I'm sure my parents were quite happy about.
Where did you move to?
Just not too far away, like another Tottenham Down. So it's kind of like, it's not too far from where my parents live. But I moved in with a mate of mine who, one of the good friends I did make and I'm still in touch with, we kind of, and still friends with, we kind of lived together as our kind of like first attempt at being grown-ups. But, it's pretty chaotic. We were both far too young, like 17 or whatever. You've got a bit of money because you're working, and you used to just spend it on booze basically, and go down to pubs in Bristol city centre. There used to be this club called the Beer Cellar, which is like indie club, open till like 12, 1 at night, 1 in the morning. And they used to do like Newcastle Brown, and they used to have like these huge like barreled cocktails. So you'd kind of, like have all of this beer, and then like they'd do like a scoop with a ladle into these like beer barrels of whatever.
Shit mix. It was like a grown up shit mix. Yeah.
Like a horrible colour, and you just like get completely trashed on that. Jump around to like Nirvana and that kind of thing, and then stagger home. Do it again Friday, Saturday.
So it's weird, isn't it? Because I have the resonate again massively with that, because it was kind of like I did the same thing in school and then got into a similar habit with work. It was kind of get through the weekend and allow myself that freedom of like escape, just to go fucking crazy on the weekend, and then go back to, the same shit of like, oh, fucking hell, I can't keep doing that. And had that repeat cycle. How did you experience that?
I don't think I ever really kind of thought at that point in time. I didn't really have any kind of like Monday blues or Monday regrets or anything. It was just like all out kind of fun, and I'd be quite enjoying what I was quite enjoying like the work that I was doing, but and I was, you know, earning a fairly decent wage, you know, like for, you know, that kind of time. You didn't really need to spend that much. I think we had like a 10 quid food budget for the week. So
Yeah.
me and my mate would go down to like Lidl and Aldi and just like get the cheapest kind of, you know, food you could buy, and spend the rest on drink at the weekends, really.
Yeah.
About that time we started doing festivals as well. We did like Glastonbury, and you know, because it's quite close, so you kind of go down and do that. And I guess it kind of built a little bit from there. You know, you'd kind of you know, it's just fun. It's just fun getting wasted. And I think what I found with drink and that kind of stuff was I could kind of be someone else. I could kind of be. It helped me in school, and it helped me when I went out. I could be like a larger than life character. I was like always the one that wanted to stay later, or, you know, do shots, or you know, turn the music up, or you could. I think this kind of like alternative version of me kind of got set quite early on.
Do you think because you sound like very self-aware talking about it now, and I think a lot of people come on this podcast and sound extremely self-aware, but I think in that phase of your life, do you think you was aware of what you was using alcohol to do, or do you think it's something that you figured out that looking back now you can see?
I think subconsciously aware, but maybe not consciously. It was just something you did. Everybody was doing it. So, you know, everybody was going out. Nobody even thought about not, you know, you just did. You know, you had a group of friends, you were into a certain kind of music, and you went to those places and you drank as much as you could until you realised that you had to go home or be sick.
yeah, you keep going. I think that's cultural, isn't it?
Or sort of, you know, find somewhere else that you could go to carry on drinking. I think I built up quite a large tolerance quite early on as well, so I was never the one that was kind of like a real mess. I mean, some people might tell me otherwise, but like, you know, I could just keep going, really.
It wasn't the liability of the group who's been put to bed or needs to go home early.
No. I did occasionally, like, because I was working, I did occasionally like fall asleep in odd places and things like that. But I think that was just me running out of steam, you know, like working a 9 till 5 and then trying to stay up till like 4 or 5 Friday, Saturday,
yeah,
a bit of Sunday.
What happened next for you then? Because obviously I know, but the people that are listening don't know that you now live in London. You know, you've made a move somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
Just for people to get a bit of a timeline on, I guess, your story. At what point do you decide that you're going to leave Bristol?
Leave Bristol and come here.
Yeah.
So yeah, where am I? Sort of like 1920. I think at that point, and I'm kind of happy talking about this. About 1920, a few of the people in our kind of group started to going to slightly different clubs in Bristol, and you kind of hear whispers of them being up till like 6, 7 in the morning, and I got quite intrigued by that, and kind of went along to this one club night at a place called Lakota when I was about 19-ish, and someone gave me my first pill, and I just had the best night. Just like absolutely loved it. Just like, you know, there was this, you know, amazing scene in Bristol where, you know, there was like 3 or 4 different clubs, and I just kind of threw myself into that sort of party rave scene. I had a really difficult breakup around that time as well. Like throughout my late teens and up to about 20, I was with a girlfriend, and she had like eating disorder, self-harm, and she was suicidal, and it kind of really kind of dragged on. We lived together for a bit in Bristol, and it got pretty dark, like and I think even though I was really young, I was kind of sort of like her carer by the end. We were like living together, but I knew that I had to get out of that relationship, but she'd also told me that if I did go, then she'd kill herself. So I was kind of stuck in this sort of cycle for quite a while. And I think going back to that kind of like the drinking and going out to those raves, it was a complete release for me from that kind of setup. And I did that towards the end of our sort of relationship. and then kind of got the courage to kind of finally call a day on it. And she's been in touch since a few years ago, and she's in a good place, which I'm glad about. But it's pretty hard thing to go through, and I don't think I dealt with it. I dealt with it. I mean, you don't know how to deal with it when you're that age. So I just dealt with it by taking loads of drugs and drinking loads.
Yeah.
But I think what that did give me, I think what that sort of party scene did give me, is it opened up my world to like all these different type of people, made loads of new friends, expanded my like friendship group, got a lot more confidence from it. Like, you were just kind of like, although it was chemically assisted, you were kind of like, you were putting yourself out there, you were having interesting conversations with interesting people that were doing different things. And through that whole scene, I met a second girlfriend, and we had this amazing kind of like quite short but very intense relationship. And she was the one that was like, she was the first one, I think, that kind of properly believed in me. Like, I was already taking a few pictures at that point, and she said, you're good at this. You should study it, and you should see what happens with it. And I was like, I don't want to go back to school. Fucking last thing I want to do is
you'll be back in a council estate again.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But I did take her advice, and I did put myself forward for a couple of courses, and I ended up on this. I think I was like 21, 22. I ended up on this amazing course. It was like a foundation in photography, purely photography. And amazing tutors, and they kind of introduced me to like all these amazing photographers, and I just loved it. I just absolutely threw myself into it and ended up doing really well. And they had a link with this famous photography agency called Magnum, and they would take a few people each year for interviews. So if you wanted to go and work at Magnum, you could kind of put yourself forward, go for an interview, and then they might take you for a year, like internship. And I didn't want to live in London. I didn't want to have the job, but I went for the interview anyway, and actually turned up completely hungover. I'd been out the night before. It was obviously like maybe a bit kind of looser in my kind of like interview because I was so hungover, and got the job. So, I mean, it was quite an amazing stroke of luck, really. That kind of like gave me that first taste of London, and gave me a year of working with some of the most, the best photographers in the world for a year. So that kind of like launched me into where I am now, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess what would be quite interesting to understand as well is, you've gone from Bristol in that heavy party scene into London, and it's almost like, was it putting fuel onto an already lit fire? Because London,
there was a bit of fuel around, yeah.
Because I guess London's like, Bristol's pretty intense anyway, and it's a big city, but London's like another step up from that, isn't it? With the opportunities, one with work,
yeah,
two with the sort of people you're saying, because you're getting to have these interesting conversations. There's lots of creative people within London, probably like Bristol. But how do you think the move to London changed your like relationship with alcohol and drugs?
I think it was really good to get away from that rave scene in Bristol. I think if I'd stayed in Bristol, it probably wouldn't have been good.
Yeah.
I think moved to London, and that kind of carried on for a little bit longer, but because we didn't know so many people, the clubs were a bit shit compared to Bristol.
Yeah.
There wasn't that kind of like community thing where you'd walk into a club and you'd know like half the dance floor. So we would go out, because I moved up here and knew a few people from that scene in Bristol. We would go out to clubs every now and then, quite often, but you'd kind of walk in and there's a bit more attitude and that kind of thing. So I think it was good to kind of leave that sort of rave scene behind in Bristol. But the booze thing, that just kind of continued, really. And the problem with working in a photography agency is there's like a gallery opening, there's an exhibition opening, and you go along on like a Tuesday or Wednesday, and it's free booze, free bar.
Yeah, of course.
And they're always on a Tuesday, Wednesday. So I used to do like a Tuesday, Wednesday, we'd go out to like a gallery opening. There used to be like quite a few on Red Shirt Street when it was kind of pretty derelict. You'd kind of go down there and sit on the pavement, and just like a massive table full of booze which you could help yourself to, sit there and then get on your bike and cycle home, go to work the next day, go to another one, and then go out with your mates like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I think it kind of continued really. It was like, I have no regrets. It was a good time. But I think looking back, I was pretty heartbroken by that relationship breaking up, and I was sort of trying to bury that with drink.
And by self-medicating
Very much, yeah.
Your way through it.
Yeah, it was like, I feel sad.
Yeah, I think that's a common misconception that people, the loudest person in the room or the most like drunk and out there person in the room's having the best time. And 9 times out of 10 in my experience, it's normally the opposite.
Yeah.
And it's normally the person that's the loudest and the most outgoing in that room is probably dealing with something and using this as a way to mask it. I guess the next question I kind of wanted to ask was, you've always said that it's been a fun experience drinking and going out. At what point did it start to change for you?
I mean, I think very early on, I think, going back to those kind of like early party days, you probably get like about a month or 2 where you can just do it and there's no effect. But then after that, you get like massive come downs, hangovers, and you sort of just get used to dealing with that. But it got pretty bad. But after I worked at Magnum, I went on to work with with another photographer, help him set up his studio. And if you've been out for like a really heavy one at the weekend, I can remember a few times just being like there and like in tears, like not knowing, in tears on the desk, like not knowing what was going on like with me mentally. But I didn't really want to I didn't know how to get out of that. I didn't know how to kind of like, everybody else was doing it around me. All my friends were doing it. You just carry on, right? You just think that's what you're going to do. So even though I knew that I was in quite a bad way, it was quite a kind of like, you're quite lonely in that period because you're like, what do I do that's different?
Do you think any of your friends or people that you were socialising with were probably experiencing the same thing, but you just, I guess as a collective group of people, it's almost like who cracks first?
Yeah.
Like, I definitely experienced that. Like I remember occasions me and my friends were literally, we'd all be getting on it, be like 7 o'clock in the morning, and we'd all start talking about all this fucked up stuff that's happened to us and all this trauma that we haven't dealt with. And then the next morning, someone might say, did anyone want to talk about last night? No, not really.
Yeah.
And
I think certainly as men, you're kind of, or as like young men, you're not well versed in kind of having those kind of conversations. You only do it when you're completely off your head. And that's really sad, but it's not something you kind of realise until you're kind of looking back and you're a bit older and you're a bit wiser, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think we're taught through any stage of our life, or my life personally, probably something similar to yourself. People who grew up in the 80s and the 90s didn't ever get taught how to regulate their emotions or how to even talk about it and articulate how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And we're never shown alternatives to other ways to show your emotions or other ways to deal with your emotions. No one ever told you like to try breathing a bit slower, slow down, try writing down how you're feeling. And the funny thing is, you're a creative person. I'm also quite creative, and I used to do those things when I was younger with writing songs and lyrics, and I didn't realise that was a way that I was trying to creatively express myself.
Yeah.
But as I got older, it's weird. It's like you feel like when you get into that teenage stage or man stage, after your 20s and your early 20s, you feel like you don't want to bring any of that stuff to the table. And I don't know what it is, because everybody in that friendship circle probably wants to talk about these things, but they just don't know how.
You don't have the tools. You don't have the you don't have the tools.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm quite glad. I think I was the first one in our group to call time on it. I remember exactly where it was. I was the last time I took any drugs was November 2008, and we'd been to like this circus theme party, and I was walking back through Brixton back to our house, dressed as a lion. That was 6-7 in the morning, sun coming up, and I was just like, I'm done. Just I knew it in my heart that I was done with that. Not drink at that point, but with drugs, I'd just got my first couple of commissions, photography commissions, and I knew that this was it for me. Like I knew that I had to throw everything at photography to make something of my life, because I completely fucked up my education. I'd been given this amazing opportunity to kind of like take pictures for a living, and I'd had like 2 or 3 shoots and kind of really just loved it. And I was like, these two things don't go together. Partying hard, staying up a weekend is not going to work. And I haven't touched anything since. I was like, I'm out. And a lot of my friends at the time found that really hard, because I basically stopped doing what they were doing, and I was still living in shared houses with them, and I'd be getting up at sort of like 7 in the morning to get on my bike and go and take pictures of people on allotments for like personal projects, and they'd all be crashing through the door having been to a club, and then they'd still be there chatting shit when I got back, you know. And there was we're still friends, but at the time I think it was difficult for everyone, you know. I think in any situation where someone does something different and sort of everyone's like, oh, maybe this isn't so good, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's quite interesting, actually. I've never really even thought about the idea of somebody stopping taking drugs but still drinking, because in my head I just couldn't even fathom that idea, because every time I drank it led to that. So I think like that's really a really interesting point. And like almost, did you have, because it's almost like 2 sets of questions, did you have like challenges around still drinking and not taking drugs? It sounds like you did with your friendship group, and sort of like a resistance in maybe like social isolation within that friendship group.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we'd still we'd go to the pub, we'd go out to gigs, they'd go to clubs, but I've always been quite good at being kind of like, quite strong-willed. So I could go out and drink and still know in my heart of hearts that I wasn't going to take anything more. Like, you know, they might be calling someone, but that wasn't what I was going to do. And I think once I'd made that decision, it was like, but I know for you, like... Yeah,
slightly different.
Slightly different.
But it's interesting. And I guess like, it's funny how that moment come at 2 different times, you know? Like it wasn't almost like a lot of people's
you
stories.
Give it all up.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's a moment where everything comes to a head, you know, and you're like, fucking hell, like I can't do this. But I think...
I mean, I've only been sober for 2 years, so I've been drinking from 2008.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, all the way through from like when I was 13, 14, but stopped drugs in 2008, and then it's taken me till a couple of years ago to stop drinking.
Yeah.
I think drinking is something that people just take as like, that's just something you do. Like, it never even crossed my mind. It's so weird sort of sitting here with you today. Like I always loved to drink. I always loved to party. I never thought that I would be doing anything apart from that for my whole life. I knew that drugs had to go, but everybody drinks. So I just assumed that that's what I would be doing.
What's the journey like then from, I guess, 2008 to, you know, what, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
What's that journey like with, you know, I guess a similar question to, you know, with the drugs you had that moment. How do you go from still drinking to all of a sudden starting to question your relationship with alcohol?
I mean, me and my girlfriend and now wife Bex, we always drank a lot since we got together, and we got together in that year 2008. We moved in together quite quickly after that, and the sort of the late nights out turned into late nights in. So we'd have people come around for dinner, and then you'd like have loads of wine, or she worked in kind of food and drink, so we'd get like sent loads of different spirits, and you'd have like this huge booze cupboard behind the dining table, and people would come round thinking they were like in for like a couple of glasses of wine, and then at 2 a.m. we're pulling out whiskey, and like, so it kind of turned into that sort of like hosting people, having parties at the house, and just fairly heavy drinking. I mean, I think even when our eldest was born, I was kind of thinking back, we were drinking every day. We'd get home, we'd like share a bottle of wine. Maybe at the weekend you kind of like have more, you'd have 2, maybe have a couple of cocktails beforehand. So there was a lot of, there was just a lot of very regular booze. And what I've learned since going sober and doing a lot of reading is actually that just completely fucks your sleep.
Yeah.
And your mental health and everything. Your body isn't getting a chance to recover in the way that it needs to. And I think for me, at the point when we had our eldest daughter, like I just don't think like drinking loads and having young kids is meant to go together, really. Because they're like, they're up through the night and then they're up at 5 or 6 wanting to play, and they're loud and they're jumping around and dancing, and if you're hanging,
it's not ideal.
It's not ideal.
Well, what point did you start to question it? Was it when you had your eldest, or was there? Because I don't know if you experienced it, but for me, a lot of people I speak to, it's like a slow, gradual sort of thing that you first question your relationship with alcohol, and it starts off sort of slowly with like, oh God, like you said, a hangover, or like, oh, shouldn't be doing this anymore. And then there must have come a point where you started to really ask yourself the question, like, how does alcohol fit in my life?
I mean, I think it happened. It actually happened quite suddenly.
Okay.
I mean, there was a lead up to it. Me and Bex would quite often get to the end of the week and crack open a bottle of wine, and it would start off on a kind of like quite joyful, like, another week's done, intense work. You've been managing the kids, and you're sort of and now it's time. It's like a couple time now. But I found that more and more we'd kind of start off on a high, and then by sort of like 10 or 11 o'clock, someone would say something, and it would turn into an argument that went on for like 2 or 3 hours about like who does the dishwasher more, or like, who's waking up the most in the night, or just like these stupid kind of conversations that would blow up, and then that would kind of wreck the rest of the weekend. You'd be barely speaking, you'd be hungover. That might be Friday, you drink again on the Saturday. You'd kind of repair your relationship through the week, and then it might happen like again at the following weekend or the weekend after. And I was kind of tired of that happening. I was really tired of that happening. Like, you're in the middle of, I don't know if you've had these conversations with Rach, but you're in the middle of this argument and you're just like, what are we doing? Why are we, this is completely ridiculous. And looking back, it was just drink and complete exhaustion. You've got young kids, work was really busy, really intense, kind of like demanding shoots, and her career was taking off, mine was taking off, and you just get to the end of the week and you like the first few glasses, you're like, oh, but then all of the kind of like the stresses just like come out then.
Yeah, I think it's, you asked the question about those conversations, and I think like in hindsight, the arguments through that cycle of repairing the weekend.
So exhausting.
It is draining as fuck. And then
so exhausting.
Also you're repairing, you're not really repairing the weekend, you're actually just repairing a bit deeper rooted issue.
Yeah.
Or
patching it up.
Yeah, trying to patch it up. Yeah, exactly. You're not repairing it, you're patching it up for it to fall apart.
Yeah. We'd have weeks where we were barely talking to each other. And the atmosphere in the house was horrible. And, I just think the kids can kind of pick up on that, even though they were really tiny at the time. And then it got to a point where we just had this one huge argument. And that kind of rolled on for about 2 months. And then we ended up at a friend's house down in Stroud for a friend of mine's 40th. And we went to this kind of garden party, and I hit it pretty hard in the afternoon. It was like rosé, the sun was out, there was a few of the old Bristol kind of rave crowd there. Went back to this house that we were staying in, carried on drinking, had dinner, had like more, like cocktails. I think I stayed up drinking with, a good friend of mine, like late into the night. And then I went up to I went up to bed and Bex was like wide awake and she was like, we need to talk about what you said earlier. And I was like, I've no idea what you're talking about. Like I completely couldn't remember like what I'd said, but it was something really
not good.
bad. Not good.
Yeah.
And this is like 2:00 in the morning and I've been drinking for 12 hours maybe. And, you know, you can barely form a kind of a conversation or a sentence at that point. But she really clearly wanted to like have a massive row. So we like had this huge row in the friend's house. Like, I mean, I'm not like a big shouter, but this was like, you know, I think no doubt they probably heard it. And I couldn't sleep afterwards. I sat downstairs by myself. Bex had gone to sleep. And I just thought, I'm done. I'm really tired of this. I mean, at that point, I just wanted to cut down. I didn't want to do the kind of like, the idea of stopping drinking altogether wasn't on the radar for me. I was just like, if I can do like a glass of wine here or there, you know, but I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to have these arguments anymore. You know, like it felt like there was only one way that was going. It wasn't a good way for us as a couple. So yeah, at that point I was like, something's got to change.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on it there. Was that the day then? Was that the last time you drank, or did you go for a little bit of a journey?
No. I mean, that was the key moment for me. But after that point, I kind of moderated.
Yeah.
For a bit. I kind of, you know, the idea of going out for dinner with Bex and not having a glass of wine, but I'd go out and have a glass, and she'd be like, "Oh, you're so fucking annoying. You know, we normally get a bottle, and now you're getting a glass." And you know, we'd have these conversations. And I remember one particular dinner, we were staying down at my folks in Bristol, and we went out for dinner, and Bex was like, I can cope with you drinking like a glass of wine, but you can't stop altogether, because I think that'll be it for us if you stop altogether. We're still together. Yeah. But you know, like it was really tough. You know, I never planned to go sober. You know, it kind of happened very gradually for me. What I did do was I kind of just went for longer and longer periods without drinking, and all of this crazy stuff just started happening. You know, like I'd do like 5 weeks, or I'd do a couple of months. I'd have like a really busy like shoot schedule, and I'd just be like, well, I'm not going to shoot until after this book or the next book. And I just have periods of like, a month, 2 months, and I'd sleep better, I'd be happier, I'd be like, you know, there's all these like weird things would start happening where I just feel better the whole time.
Yeah.
And at that point I just started like looking into it, started reading, and you know, finding out why. Basically, I think that was the kind of the turning point for me. It was kind of like experiencing what it's like not drinking, realizing it feels really good, and then, you know, educating myself about why that's happening, what's going on in my brain when I'm drinking, what's going on in my brain when I'm not, and over sort of like a gradual period of like 6 months or maybe a year, I just realized actually better off without, you know, better off not drinking.
Yeah. I was going to ask, you know, obviously that's amazing that you've made that change. And I think you can tell the positive changes that it's had on your life. But obviously it comes with its challenges, sobriety. I was going to say, what are some of the challenges that you've faced on your sobriety journey so far?
I think the most difficult thing has been our relationship. You know, like there were points in the beginning where we were still having those arguments, but the arguments were about me not drinking. I think Bex found it really hard, the idea of me stopping. It's been something that had been a massive part of our relationship. You know, I'm a food and drink photographer. She works in food and drink. You know, our holidays would be like find a nice vineyard, find an amazing restaurant, do the wine pairing, dinner, you know, all of that stuff. And I think she saw that being taken away, and without her having a say in it. So yeah, I mean, I think that, and the social side as well, you know, like I think when you do go sober, you kind of put yourself in a slightly different space. Everyone else is drinking. And I remember what it was like when, you know, you go to a wedding and there's like, you know, a friend of yours that's, I can remember an early wedding actually I went to, and a friend of mine was like, we always used to have a really good time when we were drinking together. And I kind of like was already a few glasses in and kind of went up to her and was like, she's she's like, I'm not drinking today. And I was like,
yeah.
So, you know, literally wanted to be anywhere else. So I kind of, you know, don't you? You know what the sober person in the room, you kind of like, or what my attitude to that was like, I don't want to hang around with that person. So I think kind of figuring out the social aspect and obviously our marriage was the most difficult part. I found that really tough because the other thing is you kind of look online and sort of follow other people and they be talking about how supportive their partners are, or and you just feel like that's not happening in my house.
But yeah, I think it's an important subject. So I think there's an element of that's not necessarily spoken about 100% truthfully online as well. You know, like Rachel, for example, has been amazingly supportive, but you know, I wasn't posting stuff for the first year or 9 months of my sobriety journey, and there was real sticking points. You know, like we thought we were going to break up at some points because, and I think it's also in hindsight how I dealt with myself going sober, and I think you are often, you make a choice without really thinking about how that impacts other people, especially in sobriety. And you're always told, you know, protect your sobriety, that has to come first. And I think if you're from a recovery standpoint and an addiction standpoint, 100%. But also, like you said, our relationship was built around going out drinking and going to restaurants and sharing that bottle of wine. And it's a huge part of any relationship, isn't it? I think when that suddenly gets taken away, it's not just an easy ride to go, I'm going to stop doing this. You know, because if you had a ritual, if you put it into anything else and you had a ritual that you both did together and all of a sudden someone turned around and said, I don't want to do that anymore. And it wasn't drinking. You would be like, whoa, that's what I do. You know, where do we go from here? How have you sort of overcome those challenges socially and I guess within your relationships?
I think it's just taken time with Bex. You know, like we're 2 and a bit years in, and I think she's realised that this is me now. And I think, you know, she's a lot more understanding now. I mean, it is tricky. You know, she's sort of said that, you know, she doesn't really want to stop drinking, and I think if you have one person in a relationship that is still drinking, then it kind of holds up a bit of a mirror to. She's actually said that, you know, like I'm walking around doing kind of, you know, like healthy stuff and getting up early and doing a bit of yoga and going out for runs, and you know, you're kind of, it's hard not to kind of compare that version of life with what she's doing. We're still drinking, so I think I can see it's been really tough, but luckily we've had like a really solid like foundation. We've known each other since we were kids. Our parents were friends, so, and we've been through a lot in our relationship before that, so I think we had a pretty solid ground to kind of like build from. What
about the socialising aspect of it outside of your relationship? I mean,
come and hang out with you.
Yeah, that tends to work. But no, do you know what? It's interesting. You mentioned it earlier. I was exactly the same. Anyone who said they didn't drink, you can't trust a man who doesn't drink. It's come out of my words. Yeah. You know, I said that all the time. One of my best friends now.
I used to think like, sorry, I interrupted you. I used to look at people that were kind of didn't drink, and I'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? Why would you not drink in order to like end up with maybe like another couple of years at the end of your life? Like that doesn't make sense. Have all the fun now, die a bit younger, fine.
Yeah.
And then what you don't realise is that when you go sober, you're like, oh, actually, every single day is better.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, and you know, like that never occurred to me that it would be better not drinking. Sorry, Karen.
No, not at all. It's just interesting you said that, because like I said, I remember one of my best friends now is someone who, he doesn't drink for religious reasons. And I remember, so he's a friend through Rachel. So it's actually Rachel's best friend's partner. And I remember just being like, Rachel was saying, and we're meeting this guy for the first time, you know, he doesn't drink. Oh, fuck's sake. And that was my initial reaction, like,
yeah.
Well, what are we going to do then?
Yeah.
And, you know, it wasn't until I stopped drinking, I actually apologised to him. And I was like, mate, I'm so sorry. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, I never said anything to your face, but you know, I probably never made you feel that comfortable. I would get like outrageously drunk in front of him, you know, like he's not drinking, the two girls are talking and he's just got this drunk guy chatting to him off my tits.
Yeah.
And it's like, didn't take into any consideration or even ask him, like, why don't you drink?
Yeah.
And when I did ask him why don't you drink, it was more from a place of like, that's wrong, not like I'm trying to understand. And I think now, you know, we've become so close over the last 2 years, and all the stuff I've actually lent on him so much over the last couple of years to be like, how do you deal with this? You know, because he's never really drunk. He's never had to, but he went to a school where everybody drank, all of his friends drink, you know, his partner drinks. I was like, how do you deal with all of that? And he was saying exactly what you said. He was like, I just, you know, live in the present day, and I'm grateful for things. And it's just interesting that you can go from one end of the spectrum totally to the opposite. And I've actually had people say to me, like, why are you posting all this shit on Instagram? You used to abuse me. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, how have you dealt with the social aspect as well then?
I mean, the group that you started is amazing. And, you know, I think if you've got sort of like, if you can find a sort of a community that you can be part of, other sober people, just having that like little daily kind of like the odd message here or there, then I just think that's so amazing, because it can be quite a solo thing that you're doing. Like, most people in that community might be the only one in their social group, their friendship group, that isn't drinking. But then if you've got like 40 or 50 people on a you know, in a WhatsApp group or something, everyone doing the same thing, then it kind of just helps day to day, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of people who try to live the exact same life, and I did as well. I definitely was guilty of that, trying to do all of the same things. And I really wanted to prove to people that, you know, you can be sober and you can still go to the pub. And then it wasn't until I kept doing that, I was like, I actually don't enjoy this. I'm doing this for someone else. The
pub's a tricky one where you're just going to drink. I still find that, like, I'll go out for dinner and like I still love doing that. You know, go out to a nice restaurant with friends or go out for dinner. The pub is a tricky one. Like, some dads at our school got together for the first time actually last Friday, and there was like, I got added to this sort of like Down Main dads group, and they were all going to this pub near us, which is an amazing pub. It's like a proper drinkers pub. They have like Irish bands there on a Thursday night, but it's like there's no food.
Yeah.
You go there to drink. You go there to drink. And it was Friday night, last Friday, and I was talking to Bex in the run up. I was just like, I don't know if I want to go. She's like, just don't go. And in the end, I just didn't go. You know, like they're really nice people. I'm sure I would have had an okay time, but the idea of just going there and sitting and drinking a non-alcoholic beer with them and trying to make friends, you know, just didn't really like. I think one of the great things about being sober is you get to know yourself a lot better, and I was just like, actually, it's not what I want to do.
I think you become more, because you get so comfortable with yourself, you become comfortable with the idea of people not liking you. And I used to be so worried about everybody liking me, and I would put on different hats for different occasions, and I would go out of my way to go to things I didn't want to so I could be liked. And I think once you sort of accept yourself and you get to that self-acceptance piece, you just think, well, actually, it's fine, because not everybody's going to like me. And that's kind of a sign that you're doing things right. Because if everybody likes you, then, you know, you can't like everything in life, because you're doing things that you don't want to be doing. Yeah. And I think like the minute that you just accept that it's okay to not want to do stuff, and it's okay to not be liked. I think like the pub piece as well, if you're going with people you already know, like for me, like my dad and, you know, Rachel's dad, that's like the way they socialise. And I think that's fine. And
you've had some quite long...
Yeah, some big sessions that I'm not even drinking at, you know. And
hats off to you for doing that. Like, I think I probably would have been like, I'll come for a couple of hours and then I'm going to go for a run.
Yeah, I think I have learned that now though. So I did the whole like 6-7 hours in a pub, and, you know, like 5 alcohol-free beers later, have a really bloated stomach and quite pissed off, and I ended up ruining my night. And that was probably at a stage in my journey when I wasn't accepting of who I am. Whereas now I would just say exactly what you said, like, if you're going to watch the football, what time's it kick off? 3. Cool, I'll meet you at 3. Like, you know, I don't need to be in a pub from 12.
Yeah. Or maybe 10 minutes before. Quick catch up, and then the match starts.
You can watch the game, and then after the football, I'm going to shoot, or I'm going to order some food to the table, eat my food, and then go home. And I think it's just finding your feet, isn't it?
Yeah. But that's the best thing about it, like finding out who you are. Like, I thought I knew who I was, and actually I'm not that kind of like, I'm not the party animal. I'm not the guy that jumps on the kitchen top and turns the music up and dances. I'm just like, quite shy, quite quiet, quite happy in my own company. Like that's one of the best things about it, I think.
Definitely. I was going to ask you actually, what have been some of the benefits? You touched on finding out who you are and other things, but what other benefits have you noticed on your sobriety journey?
I mean, I think there are so many. I think the like clarity of mind is just like amazing. Just sort of every day, exactly like who you are, where you're at. Obviously that you have like ups and downs, and when you do go through downs, I think it's really important if you can get through those without drinking, because it just makes you so much stronger. I think we're taught from a really early age, and we're kind of we're used to just being like, things are difficult. just gonna have a drink, and you go through some stuff and you don't drink and you feel stronger after it. But yeah, I mean, the sleep is amazing as well. Like I've struggled with sleep on and off throughout my life, and had insomnia when I was quite tiny, and really know the value of it. And I think that was kind of the first thing for me, sort of early days, was like when I would have sort of 5 or 6 weeks off. By the end of that, I would go to sleep and I would just be like, I'd wake up and, that kind of really heavy kind of like feeling where you've rested like really properly. Just be like, oh my God, I've, literally hadn't felt like that probably since I was about 10. Because if you're drinking every weekend, then the alcohol takes, like 3 or 4 days to get out of the system, and then you're drinking again. You're never really sort of like sleeping properly, never really resting. And God, it's amazing, isn't it, when you kind of like actually start resting your body in your mind, like 8 solid hours, like 2 and a bit years in, and I've slept really well, like every night for that. Like,
it's interesting you say that,
couple of years,
because I used to sleep. I used to say I can live off of 4 or 5 hours, and now if my sleep's interrupted, I've really noticed a difference. Whereas previously, because that was the quality of sleep that my body got used to, it doesn't mean it was enough. It just meant that I could just run on less fuel, but I wasn't running very efficiently.
No.
It's like putting diesel in a petrol car. Like it's not going to end well. And like I said, I would be able to say to people, I can go to bed at 12. I'm up at 4:30 in the morning for work. It's not really a problem. And the sleep was always very disturbed, Whereas now, like if I sleep, generally, I'll sleep right the way through the night, and you wake up feeling rejuvenated.
And it's not proper sleep if you're drinking till like 10, 11 o'clock at night, and you go to sleep. You probably wake up with a bit of like the fear and a bit of like anxiety at like 2 or 3 in the morning. You might be up for like an hour, then you like go back to sleep. That's not resting your body, is it?
No, it's a torture method. But another question I had was like, what have you noticed with the time and the things that you're doing now that you're sober? Because you said you started to learn who you are, and have you noticed any difference in sort of the things that you're doing?
I think I've sort of reconnected with I think weirdly you kind of reconnect with quite a few of the things you did before you started drinking. So I'm doing like a lot more cycling, running. I was playing tennis quite a lot for a while. All of those things that just give you like pure joy without drinking. And there was one particular moment where I, early days where I took my bike to France, and I just like, it was a bit awkward for me and Bex because France is always a place where we got like nice wine and sat up drinking late and that kind of thing. And, I would leave very early in the morning to go on these bike rides, and, you just be cycling through these amazing villages in the sunshine. And like, I can remember coming back and just feeling this overwhelming like rush of like joy, just like that I hadn't felt for, I don't know, however many years. And it's just, you get moments like that from things as like simple as just getting on your bike. I mean, it's mad. You go out for like a 30, 40, 50 mile bike ride and get a massive rush from that. Way better than, being in a nightclub at 4 a.m. or like drinking like 10 pints.
I agree. It is the small little things that really make a difference.
And you end up thinking, why is this making me feel so good? Like, it's strange. I can remember coming down to meet you once and like just having some tunes on in the car and the weather being good, and it's just like, your body with alcohol, I think, gets used to kind of functioning on such a kind of a deadened level. Like I've done a bit of reading into it, and it stops you from feeling joy in everyday things, which is why when you stop drinking, people get that kind of pink cloud thing, because all of a sudden your body kind of like starts repairing itself and you're able to feel joy in like the little things. The weather's good and you're just like walking around with a massive grin on your face.
It's interesting as well. Funnily enough, I haven't done that much reading on sort of what alcohol does to your body, and exactly what you said, I just had vivid memories of that feeling of like going from this base level here to like, fuck, I feel alive again. And it is, but you don't realize the science behind what's happening. But it's proof in people that are doing it. They always say that they have that feeling.
And I haven't met anyone who's gone sober yet that's like, I went sober and it's just really shit.
Yeah, exactly. And the people that either relapse or go back to drinking, whatever you want to call it. I know there's different terminology for different people. Always the same feeling of like, why have I done that? So I think that's something, if you're listening and you're use that as fuel to power yourself on, to think like, it's not going to end. It's never going to end. It might not be life or death for you, but it's not going to end well.
And I think one of the things I wanted to kind of talk with you about today and sort of get across is like, you don't need to kind of be in a place of like, being like a so-called alcoholic or an addict to kind of to stop. Like, I think those particular terms are useful. You can, if you are an alcoholic, you can kind of say, like, this is where I'm at, and it can help you because you can get that support. But I think if you're not in that space and you don't class yourself as an alcoholic, then why would you even think about stopping? Whereas actually, like, I think most people could benefit. Well, everybody could benefit from stopping, but like, I think it would become more of an accepted thing if you could just be like, well, drinking every night, that's probably not that good for me. Maybe I'll try stopping. But I think most people think I've got to get to that point of, like losing my house, losing my wife, like drinking.
It doesn't have to be that, does it? I think that's an important thing to talk about as well, because, you get caught up in your own little world of what you define as, you said like an alcoholic, an addict, but there's benefit to it no matter who you are. And I think even just challenging your own relationship with it will only benefit you. Like, just
try it. Just see, like do a month or two without. I know it sounds easier than it actually is, and I've been in those early stages, and it can be really tough. Like, you're so used to every single social occasion you go to being revolving around booze. It's really hard going into those spaces and not. But if you can get through a couple of months and still do fun things, get yourself out in the world, go to social occasions, realize that you can do it without drink, then, like, see what you feel like after 2 or 3 months.
And I think, it will totally reframe your thinking around it as well. And like I said, even if it's not stopping, next time you have a drink, ask yourself, why am I feeling the need to drink in this situation? And I think if the answer to that question is because I don't want to feel this, or because I've got to put up with this person, or if there's a reason...
Socially anxious.
There's a reason behind your drinking, and it's not a positive one because actually I like the taste of Aperol Spritz on a sunny day, then fair enough. But I think...
There's some good non-alc Aperol Spritzes I've had, and they're just the same.
And that's the thing, you realise that it's like, if it's coming from a place of trying to deal with something, if it's a solution to a problem, deal with the problem. It's not, alcohol should never be a solution. But if it's aiding your, this is coming from someone who classes himself as an addict and an alcoholic. If it's aiding your environment and it's complementing things, then fine. Then it's not ruining your life. Like, I'm jealous of you, mate. Like, that's not me.
But still, even if you're in that spot, why not just give 2 months or 3 months of your life just to try and without? See what happens.
Well,
and then go back to it if you fancy it. But
it's not going anywhere. That's the other thing I say
anywhere.
to people. It's not disappearing off the face of the earth, and it's not suddenly going to become, like illegal. Or it might slowly turn into something like tobacco, where there's a few more regulations and rules around it. But that's a podcast for another time. But we've actually been speaking for just up to an hour now, so we're going to have to wrap it up. I've got 2 questions that I like to ask everyone at the end of the pods. And the first question is, what is the single best thing that sobriety has brought you?
I think the clarity in my mind and my mental health, and knowing that I can be like this and feel like this for however long I've got left.
That's amazing.
And I think that spreads out into every aspect of my life. We haven't talked a huge amount about having kids, but like, they know me as someone who doesn't drink, and they'll always know me as someone that doesn't drink, and I'll be consistent, and I'll fuck up parenting quite often, I imagine, but like, I can be constant for them and for me, and I'm kind of excited and looking forward to what happens next.
Oh, that's amazing. And the final question is, what is the one piece of advice that you wish you received at the beginning of your sobriety journey, which you would give to somebody else at the beginning of theirs?
I know you said you didn't do a lot of this, but I think if you can read about what's going on in your mind and your body, that was a big turning point for me. Experiencing better sleep, experiencing lower anxiety, and then going to a few books and reading about why those things are happening. And there was just so many sort of light bulb moments where you're like, and it cements it in your own mind. You're like, well, that's why those things are happening. Why would I go back and do that again, to my mind? Like, there's one called This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. And that was amazing. I've read that like 2 or 3 times. And there's just some stuff in there, and you're just like, okay, I understand now. I understand why I felt a bit anxious before shoots. I understand why I wasn't sleeping properly. I understand why I just felt a bit shit the whole time. And I understand why I feel amazing now. And I think if you can kind of experience those things on a personal level and also read about the why, then it will help you massively going forward.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I think, I said I didn't read a lot, but I definitely listened a lot. And, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
And
or if you're not, like, I wasn't into, like, I couldn't get through like a factual book. I read a lot of fiction, but as soon as I started down this journey, I just read as much as I could get my hands on, every single book on going alcohol free. But they're all as audio books, so put one on when you're going for a run, or there's another one, David Nutt, Drink. That's kind of quite good on the science. Catherine Gray.
Yeah.
Unexpected Joys.
Of going sober, yeah.
I think those 3 for me, I was just like, there was no going back once I'd sort of read those.
Yeah, no, perfect. Thank you for being so open and so honest. And it was really, really interesting to hear your story. Obviously, I know you on a personal level, so it was really nice to...
Goes quick, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, yeah, to hear it. And like I said, you shared some really interesting topics and a lot of things that are probably going to help people. So thank you, Steve.